Hello again, Struck Quap. Here I am with another Diablo IV Season 2 info video, and this one will be dedicated to the Resistances rework. Resistances 2.0 all you need to know. It even rhymes. So yes, as promised, Blizzard are finally delivering with the second season next week the reworked resistances. And believe me, from what we know, from what I've read, from what you would learn if you don't know it with this video, it's one step towards the right direction with resistances and also armor, because armor used to give us resistances. You find out what's happening to that at the end when I'm listing patch notes related stuff. But yeah, before we go into the info, let's first give you an overview of what the season 2 is. Stepping out from the shadows that once obscured them, the Dark Master's Bloodseekers swoop in to prey upon unsuspecting mortals. Their ravenous appetites have grown. The season of blood will soon ooze throughout Sanctuary. Diablo 4 second season begins on the 17th of October at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Dare to look Fang destruction in the face and send it back to hell with a new season journey, questline, season event, deadly blood-driven enemies, battle pass, and more. Plus, new Uber endgame bosses have arrived in Sanctuary to increase the variety of endgame activities in Diablo 4. These have a clicking bosses, are hard to topple, but can drop unique items and cosmetics found nowhere else. I've already made videos regarding the seasonal event, the bosses, the season journey and questline, the battle pass, the seasonal mechanics, and the bosses. So I've got those things covered, but from now on I'll be making videos regarding the more deep stuff. So buckle up, struck up, and let's go. I believe the most important thing regarding the resistances that you would want to know first would be what's the difference between season 2 resistances compared to season 1 and pre-season, how they used to work. Let's dig into the formula. First, elemental resistances are being overhauled in the Season of Blood. Here's how they currently work and how they work in both Seasonal and Eternal Realms once the Season of Blood begins. So this change, as expected, will be throughout Seasonal and Eternal, not just the season. So previously, in Season of the Malignant, elemental resistances were inverse multiplicative. This means that you received the same effective life each time you gained a bonus. But the nominal value of the bonus was less. For example, if you had 20% poison resistance and then received 20% more, you would have 36% poison resistance in total. Elemental resistances had no hard cap, which means you could gain them indefinitely. And armor provided physical damage reduction as well as damage reduction from all enemies, which imposed on the row of elemental resistances. This made armor so powerful to the point that it outperformed individual elemental resistances. Rings and amulets had two inherent stats that gave resistances to two random elements. Now, in the Season of Blood, things are changing. Elemental resistances are now additive. As it is in the majority of Diablo-like games, to be honest, and have a base cap of 70. This cap can be raised with new effects that increase the cap to a hard cap of 85%, such as skills, paragon boards, elixirs, etc. Armor now only reduces physical damage, which we'll talk about later. The more resistance you have against a particular element, the more valuable each percentage is for total effective life. For example, going from 60 to 65 fire resistance is much more valuable than going from 20 to 25%. Rings and amulets will still have two inherent stats: resist to all elements and a random elemental resistance, which is very, very interesting. You have to mix and match properly. And the inherent ones are not rerollable, so you would probably have to keep fishing for the right one, or patch up resistances elsewhere to accommodate for what you have here as inherent. Season of Blood elemental resistance will become a much more important part of your character's survivability as expected. The developer's goal here is to present a puzzle to solve of how to reach the maximum base of elemental resistances, while also giving you the tools to solve that puzzle through methods such as itemization, the skills tree, elixirs, and the paragon boards. The developers also provide a base amount of resistance to all elements in jewelry to prevent players from falling behind in any individual resistance. It's also worth mentioning that as you go through World Tier 3 and 4, the resistances will be reduced. So if you can max them out on World Tier 2, eventually on World Tier 3 you would have to reduce stuff. Obviously you would have to switch to Sacred Gear, and then with Tier 4 Ancestral. But here's something worth noting. Around level 80, you should be able to maximize your elemental resistance at the 70% base maximum. There's a journey to solve the resistance puzzle, but it is one that you will eventually solve. Then you can move on to other stats that you want to prioritize for your character. It's not about whether you will reach the maximum, but more about what methods you choose to get there, which is, I think, a great philosophy, at least in this regard. The next thing worth giving you as information is all the resistance related patch notes I believe are important. So, starting with this one. Prior to Season of Boot, resistance is stacked inverse multiplicative. You already mentioned that earlier, but let's list it as a patch note. With each additional source of resistances becoming less effective. And now starting with Season of Boot, resistances will stack additively. Additionally, resistance stats cap at 70%. For example, you have 30 resistance and an item gives you 20, you now have 50. Whereas before, if you had 20, if you had 3 sources of 20 resistance, the first one would be 20. Then the next one would add 16, and then the next one would add 12.8, totaling for 48.8 back then. Resistance boosting elixirs now also increase the player's maximum resistance value, which is very, very good, up to 85% as we mentioned. Added a new resistance category within the stats section in the inventory. World Tiers 3 and 4 now apply a minus 25 and a minus 50 percent penalty to resistance to all elements instead of a multiplier, which is good. It's easier to deal with that. 25 and 50% resistances, considering how much the maximum upgraded jewelry of an ancestral item gives you, it would be easy to deal with that eventually. Single resistance affixes can now roll on pants. Single resistance affixes can now contribute a maximum value of 35% resistance for a fully upgraded normal item, 48 for a sacred, and 65 for an ancestral to your total resistance. So with that 65, you can negate the minus 50% resistance penalty of a certain element and even get 15 on top of it. That comes with World Tier 4. Then all resistance affixes now give you a maximum value of 9% for a fully upgraded item normally, 12% for a sacred, and 16 for an ancestral. Which is a great number, 16 to all resistances for a fully upgraded ancestral. Then ring inherent affixes can now give percent resistance to all elements and percent single resistance instead of 2% single resistances, which would definitely make capping out all resists easier. The maximum value is +6/+6 for a fully upgraded normal item, +8/+8 for a sacred, and +10/+10 for an ancestral, which means an ancestral item would give you +10 to all resistances and +10 to a single specific resistance that's inherently wrote on that item that you cannot change. Then amulet inherent affixes can be adjusted to 14 resistance to all elements for a fully upgraded normal item, 19 for sacred, 24 for an ancestral. So just with 2 rings and an amulet fully upgraded as ancestral, you would have 44 to all resistances, which is almost dealing fully with the penalty of 50% at World Tier 4. Almost. Then single resistance values on gems have been adjusted. For example, crude, chipped, normal, flawless, royal go as follows: 8%, 13%, 18%, 24%, and 30% for royal to a single resistance. All resistance values on diamond gems have been adjusted. So it goes like that: crude 1%, chipped 2%, normal 3%, flawless 4%, and royal 5%. So if you have 3 royal gems that are diamonds, you would have 15 to all resistance. And if you combine that with the 44% all resistance of a fully upgraded ancestral ring plus amulet, it means you would have a what is it, 69, I think. Actually, it's 59. 59 is what you would have, which is a solid massive chunk of all resists, excluding the resist to a single element bonuses from gear. Then single resistance paragon nodes have been adjusted to +10 on rare nodes and +5 on magic. All resistance paragon nodes have been adjusted to +3 on rare and +1.5 on magic nodes. Single resistance elixirs have been adjusted. Tier 1, which is weak, +2 maximum resistance, and single, and 10 resistance single, +10. Then tier 2 for a normal elixir, that's +3% maximum resistance single and +15% resistance single. Tier 3 is 4% maximum resistance, 20% resistance. Again, all of this is single. Tier 4 is for the potent elixir, 5% max resistance, 25 resistance. And tier 5 for the heady elixir is 6% maximum resistance and 30% resistance. So those elixirs would see much more use specifically for the maximum resistance bonus, especially when doing boss fights. I can see people always picking the type of elixir that corresponds to that boss's element for the new Uber bosses. Elixirs of magic resist. Adjusted to +25% to all resistances, but it doesn't give max resistance bonus. So probably not the best choice if you're doing Uber bosses. The level required to craft this elixir has been reduced from 90 to 35, and to use it has been reduced from 36 to 35. Storm of the Wilds Incense, previously increasing lightning cold and poison resistance by 12% for every nearby player. The new one is increasing lightning cold and poison resistances by 15% and their maximum resistance by 2% for every nearby player. And unless it was changed, I believe you can stack this incense with another elixir, with an elixir. So you can have 6 maximum resistance from an elixir and +2 from the incense. Then Desert Escape Incense, previously increased fire shadow resistance by 7.5 and armor by 75. The new one is increases fire cold and shadow resistances by 15% and their maximum resistance by 2% for every nearby player. Then Soothing Spices Incense, increased all resistances by 10% and armor by 150% is how it used to work. The new one is increased resistance to all elements by 10%, maximum resistance for all elements by +1% and armor by 150 for every nearby player. This one would be very useful. Yes, you get 1% less to maximum resistance to all of them, but you get all element resistance and you get armor. So it's good against physical and elemental attacks to have that incense. And then intelligence now gives you plus 0.025 all resistance per 1 intelligence instead of 0.05. So half of what it used to give. But since the rework, it was necessary. Otherwise, you would have a ton of resistances, especially on intelligence mains. Then armor contribution percent. So non-physical damage reduction from armor and resistances are no longer split. Resistances now contribute their full value to non-physical damage reduction. Armor no longer contributes to non-physical damage reduction and now only reduces damage against physical attacks, physical damage.
To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer wanna be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end. Struck up, keep it cool until next time, and goodbye.